All right, we're going to go ahead and get started, everyone. Thank you, Frank Hayworth, for doing that slideshow presentation for us. Welcome, everyone. My name is Gina Bono, and I'm a volunteer with the Portland chapter of the Native Plant Society of Oregon. NPSO promotes the enjoyment, knowledge, and protection of Oregon's native plants. And I'd especially like to welcome any of our new members tonight. As part of our mission, we present a speaker each month on timely topics of botanical interest. We have two speakers tonight, Andrew Stern and David Anderson, and we will get to their presentation in a moment. First, let's review some Zoom etiquette. So please leave your audio and video turned off during the program. After the presentation, we will have time to unmute and turn our cameras on. This is a great time for new members to introduce themselves, as well as for everyone to connect virtually. If you have a question during the program, click the chat button at the bottom of your screen and type it into the chat box. Andrew and David will address your questions after the slideshow. We've also added a closed captioning feature. You can find that on the bottom of your screen and then click live transcript to enable that. Looking ahead to our June 9th presentation, our virtual program will be with Chris Adlam, whose talk is titled Good Fire, Revitalizing Indigenous Burning from the Salish Sea to the Sierra Nevada. Please register for that through our quarterly Calicortis publication or our meetup page. For a quick update on the April Bio Blitz, I will now turn it over to Portland Chapter Treasurer, Lisa Shaw. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. You can remind them that they're not going to hear me very well.
Yes, Lisa is dealing with some laryngitis this evening, so her voice is not quite up to her usual speaking caliber.
For some reason, I'm not being able to slide. Oh, because my window's in the wrong spot. Okay, so Dave and Andrew, I assume, and I put together the April Bio Blitz for the Native Plant Appreciation Month. And, oh, well, the view just changed. But we had 1,000 observations and 222 species. And you can see that geographer Dave, our presenter tonight, David Anderson, has 125 observations and 76 species. This is so weird that it's not showing. Well, as we can probably guess, some of the top species, let's see if it goes this, there we go, was the trillium and the big leaf maple. And the information that went out about the Native Plant Month focused on the big leaf maples. So there we go. So don't forget too that we are also currently doing our wildflower Bio Blitz for May. And we now have 224 species. These are new species and 1,000 observations in only a week and a half in. And we have more observers because this project is more open. And again, our most observed species is the trillium, but actually the camas is right up there as well. So anyway, please join us. And after tonight's presentation with David and Andrew, we're going to try to put together one for burned areas and their not their restoration, but how they're returning from the dead. So thank you all. And Gina, go ahead.
Thank you, Lisa. That was really cool to see all of the stats from last month, and looks like May is going to be a big Bio Blitz month too. So that's exciting. If you're not signed up for iNaturalist, you can do that and get get in the game. Still plenty of time and a lot of things blooming right now. So very cool. All right, so coming back to tonight's presentation, I'll now introduce our speakers. David Anderson and Andrew Stern really enjoy hiking in the Cascades of Oregon and Washington. It wasn't too long ago that they saw plants on Mount Hood with leaves that reminded them of azalea. Knowing that azaleas were only found in a restricted range of the southwest corner of the state, they delved deeper into the subject. And that is what got them interested to learn what they could about Oregon's native rhododendrons. They do realize that some people don't accept the merging of Menziesea and ledum into rhododendron. However, David is a genealogist and sometimes deals with his own genetic genealogy and figuring out how people are related to him. So he is not going to argue with a geneticist who says a Menziesea is a rhododendron. David especially is active in posting observations of not just plants, but insects, fungus, and other living organisms on iNaturalist. He feels we need to look at habitats as systems, not just at individual plants. He is interested in questions such as how are the pollinators and pests associating with the plants? How is climate change impacting the range and distribution of plants, as well as other organisms that depend on those plant species? iNaturalist has allowed them both to discover species they hadn't been aware of, such as the Mount Hood short-winged grasshopper. So now they are recording them when observed on one of their many hikes. They are also actively recording other discoveries that you will hear about in their program tonight. With that, I will now turn it over to our presenters. Welcome, David and Andrew.
Thanks, Gina.
Yeah, thank you.
And hold on just a quick second. There, you should all see a nice view of the PCT up on Lolo Pass with rhododendrons in it in a foggy situation. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. And I'd like to point out that neither of us are trained botanists or entomologists, so this is going to be an informal presentation about our explorations in search of wild rhododendrons in our bioregion. So,
Is it started?
yeah.
Uh-oh. I think we selected the wrong screen.
Uh-oh. So,
Oh,
there we go. So we hope you're all comfortably seated with your favorite evening beverage in hand, since this will be an outdoor armchair guide to our Northern Cascade rhododendrons, friends and family.
And thank you for allowing us to show you some of the things and places we have seen.
During our travels in the Cascades of Northern Oregon and Southern Washington,
Here's the fall foliage, rhododendron albiform on Bald Mountain Ridge.
this is at Hawk Mountain, the fire lookout cabin, which is one of the few remaining fire lookout cabins in the National Forest System. It's on the southern end of Rhododendron Ridge, taken in August 2020, just about 2 weeks prior to the Lion's Head fire exploding. The Forest Service wrapped the cabin then and again in 2021 to protect it from the Bull Complex fire.
We assume it's still there. We haven't been able to get back. The fire lookout on Hawk Mountain may have survived the Lion's Head fire. However, these old Douglas fir on the nearby Red Lake Trail did not. And there were some huge trees.
They were in the hottest area of the Lion's Head fire. We have seen many beautiful spots and interesting things, including beaver lodges, such as this one at the Goat Marsh Research Natural Area on Mount St. Helens. And many questions have been raised on things we have seen.
Questions like, how big are those beavers anyway? How did a beaver get up that high?
Well, the short answer is there was snow on the ground.
We have made new friends, like this paddle-tailed darner in Marion County and Edith's checker spot on Little Huckleberry Mountain in Skamania County.
We've admired the view with human friends, such as on McIntyre Ridge in the Little Salmon Huckleberry Wilderness area.
We have seen insects doing it, but more on that later. At the top is the Evodinus vancouveri on a Trillium ovatum on Lolo Pass, and a bee mimic robber flies in Marion County.
We've traveled afar, and I mean far distances, to Jedediah Smith Redwood State Park in Del Norte County.
Where rhododendron macrophyllum are epiphytes on Douglas fir.
Epiphytes.
Epiphytes, thank you. And maybe coast redwoods too.
These are in Lady Bird Johnson Grove in Redwood National and State Park. So my question is, has anybody else seen this situation of epiphytic macrophyllum in Oregon? And if so, it'd be interesting to know where, or have we cut down too many of the old growth trees for it to happen?
We look high and low for interesting things to record and post on iNaturalist.
And we have seen forest change virtually overnight, such in the Sister Rocks Research Natural Area. This photo was taken in June 2020.
Big Hollow Fire, September 2020, burned 25,000 acres. Not all of the Big Hollow was burned this severely, and by some accounts, it was considered to be a beneficial fire.
This is at the trailhead to Observation Peak on the north side of the Trapper Creek Wilderness. Very little vegetation survived in this area. Did the trillium survive, or was seed blown in? This is just 1 year after the fire.
Dollar Lake fire burn from 2011 on Mount Hood.
We'll be hiking in through this area on our hike in July. The Sister Rocks Research Natural Area was set aside as an example of a Pacific silver fir forest, which mostly survived. In the burn area, it should get back to looking like this at some time in the future, depending on the severity of climate change.
Rhododendrons have possibly been in Oregon for up to 40 to 50 million years since fossils from the order Ericales, have been found in the John Day fossil beds.
This is the one example of the Ericales fossil from the John Day fossil beds. Rhododendron fossils in general are rare because their normal habitat is not conducive for fossil formation.
Rhododendrons evolved in cool montane regions. They do not grow in deserts and savannas. There are more rhododendrons in Arctic than in savannas and deserts. Oregon has about 5 species.
Rhododendron columbianum is formerly in ledum. DNA research indicates that it's related to rhododendrons. It's found along the coast in bogs and fens and in the Wallowa Mountains, but not in the Cascade. And that's always been a question. Why is it found in Washington and down in the Sierra Nevadas, but not in the Oregon Cascades?
Rhododendron occidentale is native to the southwest corner of Oregon and is widely planted on the west coast. It is not grown east of the Rockies.
Because of the climate.
Right.
Rhododendron macrophyllum is our stereotypical rhododendron.
Macrophyllum, macro is big and phyllum is leaf, not phylum, which is a taxonomic ranking.
Observations on iNaturalist indicate generally where rhododendron macrophyllum is found. It was not found in pre-European contact times in the Willamette Valley or in the northern Coast Range. Many of the records you see from cities and urban areas are misidentifications of common cultivars or hybrids. The coloring of macrophyllum is highly variable. It ranges from white to light pink to a solid pink and almost to a red.
Macrophyllum is common south of the Columbia River, such as here on Cathedral Ridge and Mount Hood, where it forms large impenetrable thickets.
And we'll see this patch on our hike. North of the river in Skamania County, there's only 5 or 6 small isolated locations. So why is it so sparse north of the river, but yet south of the river, it's rather abundant?
Columbia River is a dividing line in the distribution for some organisms. The Washington lily, named after Martha, not found north of the river, and mountain goats are not found south of the river.
The golden chinkapin is found at one location in Skamania County and then recently found southeast of the Olympic Mountains, while the Fremont silk tassel is found only around the big lava beds in Skamania County in Washington.
Nymphs. The top shows a Meridae nymph on the macrophyllum leaf of Mount Hood. And on the bottom is the azalea lacebug nymph from a Portland garden.
Like our backyard.
Right.
There's several small plant bugs can be found on macrophyllum. I'm just starting to record them and I don't know too much about them. There's the colorful one on the right is the green burgundy stink bug. And that was seen on Cathedral Ridge.
Weevils are sometimes found on wild macrophyllum plants, as evidenced in this leaf damage. This one's near Wildcat Mountain.
A variety of spiders can be found in rhododendron flowers where they wait for prey.
Fungal infections like witch's broom, Exobasidium vaccinii uglionosi. Did I get that right?
Close enough.
Okay. It's widespread. It does cause discoloration of leaves and witch's broom. If you look at the picture in the lower right, David's showing the extent of one of the witch's brooms, which is probably one of the largest we've seen.
And we'll see that one on Cathedral Ridge. In the Lolo Pass area, the rhododendron leaves tend to be chlorotic and with curling leaves, especially those plants that are in the open under the power line. So I'm not sure if that's caused by exposure to sun or possibly herbicide use under the power lines, if they do that up there.
Albiforum is one of the most restricted ranges in the state. It's found south to central Cascades and in the Elkhorns. It is no interest to horticulturalists because it is nearly impossible to grow in lowland gardens. And that is why we find it so interesting.
Albiflorum. Alba is white and florum is flowers. It's generally found at or above 4,000 foot elevation. And from iNaturalist, you can get an idea of the range north, even though the southern populations in the Cascades are not shown. There's some question whether it occurs in the Willawas or not, in the locations that are listed in the consortium of Northwest Herbaria are inconclusive or questionable and not specific enough.
White L-shaped flowers grow from previous year's stem. It especially likes north or east facing slopes and edges of moist meadows and streams, occasionally on rocky outcrops. It has shiny leaves and is deciduous.
It has a very mild, pleasant vanilla humidor fragrance, even in the fall. Passing by this plant up on Bald Mountain Ridge, it was this faint, sweet aroma that all of a sudden, what did we smell? What? Yeah, it was cool.
And habitat along the PCT north of Barlow Pass. This is on the edge of a moist or a wet area.
It does like the shade where its leaves are longer and flat. The trees in the picture on the right are now blown down in the Labor Day storm 2 years ago.
It grows in the open. It tends to have shorter crinkled leaves and maybe thicker.
And this is on Cathedral Ridge, so we'll see this area. There is a diagnostic fungal infection caused by, we believe, Exobasidium birdii. It features yellow spot infections, and it can help to identify albiflorum from species of huckleberry or Menziesii. Menziesii has a black tar spot infection. The red spots on the leaves may be a result of Romularia infection. It's not very common, and in many of the records that I see on iNaturalist do not show this, and I've only seen it in our area. Illinois type aphids are somewhat common, especially on the undersides of the leaves where the red spot infection is found. And if you notice that a few of these aphids are red, well, there's a reason for that. The females give birth to female nymphs, which are already pregnant. And interestingly, some aphids have the ability to synthesize red carotenoids by horizontal gene transfer from fungi. They are, along with two-spotted spider mites and oriental hornets, known to have this capacity. Using carotenoids, aphids are able to absorb solar energy and convert it to a form of energy that their cells can use, or adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. Predator insects of aphids include parasitic wasps, larvae of ladybugs, green lacewings, and hoverflies.
He was parasitized by a wasp on an albiforum. The aphid is dead and parasitized by the
A Felinidae wasp.
Felinidae wasp, a very small wasp, considering that
Uh,
this is a
This is taken,
microphoto.
yeah, with a microscope. Hoverfly adults are great pollinators, as you can see on the right, as they're getting pollinated themselves, but the larvae are voracious predators. And here they're on bear grass.
And
We also see bumblebees on both albiflorum and basically all of the rhododendrons. On the bottom, some of the longhorned flower beetles that we've seen include Eterophis propincus on the left and Paquita armata on the right. And hopefully we'll see one or all of these species on our trip in July.
who ate the leaves? We really don't know who ate these leaves. A chief suspect is a sawfly larva. This type of leaf browsing is not frequently seen.
So I've collected leaves on occasion to bring down to look at under a microscope, and was somewhat surprised to see the white spider mites on the bottom side of an albiflorum leaf on the left. The photo on the right is in the field, and you can see near the weevil fine red hairs, which are on albiflorum leaves, but not always readily seen.
Fall is a great time to explore where albiflorum grows. Here it is the yellow foliage plant and growing with vaccinium, the red leaf plant.
So one of the newest additions, as far as geneticists are concerned, is to the genus Rhododendron is Menziesii. It's named after Archibald Menzies, formerly in genus Menziesii, and it is found south to the Central Cascades and in the Coast Range south to Humboldt County. It may be found in the Blue Mountains.
The gap in the southern coastal range may be real. In addition to no records listed on iNaturalist, there are no specimens in this region reported on the Consortium of Northwest Huveria website. So the plants growing in Del Norte and Humboldt counties may be slightly isolated from their nearest relatives near Reedsport.
Their flowers are amber butterscotch, they're bell-shaped, and they droop, and they bloom from the stem tip.
When the flowers are finished blooming, the pedicel becomes erect.
In this species we have, or in this photo, we have two species. So when growing in shadier locations, both the leaves of albiflorum and Menziesii tend to be flat and long.
And like the albiflorum, Menziesii's leaves are shorter and crinkled when growing in more open, exposed settings, as this fall plant on Mount St. Helens attests.
Believe it or not, about a third of the plants in the road cut here, or the shrubs, are Menziesii, and these are growing along a road in the Gifford Pinchot. What really helps in a good close setting is identifying them with the fungal infection, which is possibly Rhytisma arbuti. It may not be, but it's a black tar infection, and it does help ID the plants from similar looking plants. And it is found from Humboldt County up into Alaska throughout its range.
And here's a microscopic view of the underside of leaves, mites and mushrooms. And if you look closely on the mite, there's a little red dot. And that is a mite on the mite.
A tiny mite on a tinier, or tinier mite on a tiny mite.
Yeah.
So on our Cathedral Ridge hike, we will see albiflorum and menziesii growing side by side and be able to compare the two in shady and sunny locations.
Albiflorum is yellower in the fall. Menziesii has black tar spots.
So this is a good way to distinguish the two growing together. Both albiflorum and menziesii are deciduous, but not impossible to ID in the fall and winter. On the left, you have menziesii with the pedestals standing upright, and on albiflorum on the right, they're growing horizontally off the stem from the previous year's growth. And that is unique in the genus Rhododendron.
Yeah, these pictures were taken in Indian heaven.
So there are three rhododendrons in this photo, and you should be able to by now identify the big-leafed one. And of course, everybody knows macrophyllum. And we've talked about the one with yellow spot fungal infections, and you can see that kind of in the middle left side, and that would be albiflorum. And the one remaining is in the lower right corner, and that would be menziesii. There are slight differences in the color, leaf color between menziesii and albiflorum. So where can you see them? On Mount Hood. The purple dashed lines are where you can see all three. And the yellow lines are where you can see two species. You can see Cathedral Ridge sort of in the middle, and that's where we'll be exploring in July. We'll be able to see the three species growing together and hopefully in bloom together in the lower part, and then the two other species by themselves higher up in the open. When we first started exploring, we thought we'd explore Rhododendron Ridge down in the southern Mount Hood National Forest, and we're only able to get down there once. I mean, it's obvious there's going to be rhododendrons growing on Rhododendron Ridge, at least you would think so.
And here's the view from Mount Low, looking southwest to Shriner's Peak and Bull of the Woods Wilderness Area. Nearby macrophyllum were common, but it took some work to find menziesii.
And we did find albiflorum at the south end at Hawk Mountain. There's a trail that travels the length of the ridge. It's called the, I guess, Row Ridge. It's easier to say Row Ridge than Rhododendron Ridge. I don't know.
They ran out of space on the sign.
Must be. Some people don't appreciate rhododendrons as much as we do. In fact, in the Mount Hood National Forest around Rhododendron Ridge, they treat it like brush as a weed and chop it down. We saw piles of cut rhododendron and golden chinkapin on the sides of the road on our one visit down there.
We visited Hawk Mountain in August 2020 on a weekend camping trip. We had lunch at Averill Lake beside some albiflorum, and the next day we hiked to Hawk Mountain Hawk Mountain, passing through more albiflorum. We wanted to go back and see if the mountain lived up to its name during fall migration, and show the areas to other people.
The trail passed through a nice forest of mountain hemlock and albiflorum and huckleberry. This area was burned in the Lion's Head fire. Fires were burning, Lion's Head to the east and Beachy Creek to the southwest. And all it took was
The September 7th Labor Day 2020 wind event. It was called extreme, historic. It was more like Santa Ana winds of Southern California. 106-mile-an-hour gusts were measured at Timberline Lodge, and there was widespread blowdown on Mount Hood.
This is what it looks like from
Bald Mountain.
Bald Mountain Ridge. You can see large areas of blown down forest. This is the trail on Bald Mountain Ridge and the forest that was blown down there.
It hadn't been open very long when we went over.
No,
They had a lot of trees to cut to clear the trail.
yeah, massive amount of work. This is what it looked like from our neighborhood at 7:16 p.m. on the 9th of September.
And on September 13th, the particulate was 477 micrograms per cubic meter, which is 7 times higher than previous record.
And you could barely see across the street. The combined acreage burned in 2020 during the Beachy Creek, Lions Head, and Riverside fires was over 536,000 acres. Comparison, the Tillamook burned 350,000 acres in 4 separate years, 1933, 39, 45, and 51, each 6 years apart. The Yakult burn in September 1902 burned over 500,000 acres in just a few days.
In June 2021, we had our extreme heat event, which was called unprecedented, unlike anything. We had extreme high temperatures. And of course, the record highs was 108, 112, and 116. And will this be regular, or is this a long-term? What are the long-term effects?
We had conifer scorching along in lowlands along 205 in Vancouver, and even some up in along big lava beds in Skamania counties and subalpine fir.
Leaf bleaching on inside out flower and vanilla leaf, which is south of Indian Heaven in Skamania County.
Deciduous rhododendron like albiflorum and menziesii and even occidentale, the leaves may die of dehydration, but the leaf loss will protect the plant. And in the subgenus Ponticum, it is a water-limited plant and remains vulnerable to low humidity. Extra watering may not or may be insufficient for survival in areas of increased heat and atmospheric and soil drought. Dead trees attract beetles, which in turn provide food for blackback woodpeckers, which have 3/4 of their diet consists of wood-boring beetles and Cerambycidae and Buprestidae.
Left is the Canada jay, top right, the Pacific wren, and bottom right, red crossbill. And gray, oh, yeah. Okay, never mind.
Sorry.
I don't read that fast.
Bee mimic robber flies are fascinating flies. They're what I call bugly. These two are in this genus Laphria. They're harmless to humans, and mostly, we think. Voracious predators, and when they eat their prey, they inject an enzyme into the innards of the prey, which then dissolves the innards, and then they are able to suck out all the goodies. And in this case, the female is having some nuptial nosh.
And butterflies. At the top left is a Mariposa copper. The bottom left is a painted lady. And on the right is a great spangled fritillary.
We frequently see ichneumoniid wasps, which are parasitoid wasps. There's over 25,000 species, many of which are not described yet. In the dragonflies, we've seen northern spreadwing on the upper left, bandwing meadowhawks, crimson-ringed whiteface, and variegated meadowhawks. In grasshoppers, I didn't know that there were so many undescribed grasshoppers in the area. And how many unique ones are there in small ranges. Cascade timberline is not too well, doesn't have a very big range, but is found around Mount Rainier and south to Mount Hood. The Mount Hood shieldback in the upper right has not yet been described. The slow mountain on the lower right is somewhat common, and the Mount Hood shortwing is found, of course, around Mount Hood and south down around to Sandy Am Pass, and possibly up into Washington.
Klingon warbird is one of our favorites. This is otherwise known as snakefly. They're voracious predators, and they get found in the northern hemisphere in all the temperate regions, fairly common. They are living fossils, and there are fossils from the Jurassic period to over 140 million years ago.
Sawflies are rather colorful. They're generally plant eaters in the nymph stage. The adults only live 7 to 9 days, and they can be agricultural pests, but they are beautiful.
Thank you for watching our presentation.
This isn't quite the end, though we're getting close.
Although, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Although it may be for the Moradella beetle in the flower.
So it's time to get out of your easy chair.
Go for a walk in the woods. Ask yourself, what's around the corner? And then answer that question.
Maybe we'll see you on the trail, as in Cathedral Ridge.
We might be talking with the birds.
And we'll definitely be wondering where that grasshopper went.
We hope you have enjoyed the presentation half as much as we had in our travels in search of wild rhododendrons.
As in Cathedral Ridge, as in this picture.
Yeah.
So we want to again thank you for your time and hope you enjoyed the presentation. And we'll take any questions anybody might have.
Thank you so much, David and Andrew, for that presentation. That was wonderful. We do have some questions in the chat here. Do the native rhododendrons suffer from Phytophthora sin, like the
Yes.
cultivars in the city?
I believe they do, but I don't know for 100% sure. I would think they would. So, but I don't know for sure.
Another question, do you know about rhododendrons having poisonous nectar?
Yeah, they do. And I heard there was it the Greeks way back when had honey that they gave to their enemies that was from rhododendrons, and they got sick and weren't able to fight. So the Greeks won.
Something like that.
Something like that. Yeah. So yeah, rhododendrons, although Trapper Tea, the Leadham group, you can make tea from. You have to be careful with rhododendron. So the common name of Menziesii is mock azalea, and that is what got our attention, because we were up on Mount Hood hiking around. We saw this azalea like looking like plant and going, what the heck is that? There's no azaleas up here. And anyway, so it is the mock azalea, and it mocks you, mocked us.
That's great. And Lisa had a comment about maybe the rhododendron will be one of the species that OFFRE, or is that an Oregon Forestry acronym? I'm not sure. May try to eliminate and call it underbrush and fire tender. So
Yeah.
maybe that's what they were up to
Mm-hmm.
up there. Another question, how long do the rhododendron seeds last in the soil if they're being cut and or burned? Is there seed bank to regenerate the stands?
Actually, they regenerate from sprouts off the root, or the root ball, the stem, as long as they're not too seriously burnt. So that's one thing that we're want to get back up to the big hollow fire area to see. A year later, the Menziesii that we saw up there hadn't really started to sprout. So we're, that's, yeah, we don't think it's going to kill them off, but yeah, so.
Yeah, they seem to do well after fire, at least the macrophyllum.
Yeah.
And another question, the non-native rhododendrons in Susan's yard were hit hard by last year's heat dome. And I will also second that my rhododendrons were hit pretty hard. But they seem to have recovered this year, and she's curious about your observations with that.
Right. The ones that we showed in the picture, just a couple of blocks away from our house, and they seem to, for the most part, not entirely, but for the most part, recovered.
They lost leaves.
They lost leaves for sure. I have some that were still struggling. So the next time it happens, you might want to cover them and then make sure they get some water too. We know a grower out in Sandy who had to cover his, and anything that wasn't covered, even though it wasn't directly in the direct sun, still got badly burnt on a couple of the more sensitive plants. So most of them should recover. I have one in the pot that's looking pretty ugly, but probably got a little more heat stress than the ones in the ground. But yeah, cover them, and next time it happens, hopefully it won't, but it will. So.
Are you covering them with like shade cloth or?
Yeah. And if you don't have any of that, then I suppose a white sheet might help. But otherwise shade cloth would. Yeah.
And you want to tell folks about your hike coming up in July, the details on that?
Sure. We're going to go up to Cathedral Ridge.
The Mazama Trail.
The Mazama Trail. And it'll be maybe, depending on how far we go, anywhere from about 1,700 foot elevation gain to maybe 2,000 feet.
That would be a stretch goal.
Yeah, that would be a stretch though. It'll be maybe 6 miles round trip. There is a little bit of climbing, but it's not this, they've put in switchbacks, so it's rather somewhat civilized compared to the former straight up the hill trail that used to be there. So it's not terribly steep, and of course we'll be going at botanist pace, and so yeah. And there's a lot of good views of Mount Hood, and of course the Albiflorum Menziesii should be in full bloom up there.
See Mount Adams too.
And see Mount Adams, and I think Hollins too.
Hollins as well. Yeah.
So yeah, and hopefully some interesting beetles and stuff.
Great. Yeah, I'll just remind members that they'll find that in the June Calicortis publication, we'll have a list of the field trips for June, July, and in the next publication, and then they can sign up through the Calicortis as well as the meetup page for that as well. So those were all the questions. Did you have anything else you wanted to say about your iNaturalist?
Yeah, I started listing, I don't know how many years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. I've got over 13,000 observations listed in that time period. And I started by keeping track of things in my backyard. And I came up with the first record for west of the Rockies, the Green's giant ichneummonid wasp. It has been seen a couple of times since then in the Portland, Vancouver metro area. There's also been a millipede that's endemic to the Portland area, described back in 1910. And the Italian tubic moth, I had like the second record for North America in my yard. People don't know how it got here, but it's here. So it's little things like that that, I think people making contributions, they don't know. I don't know what I'm looking at most of the time. And the information we got about the aphids, the Illinois aphids, was from an Italian grad student. So it's like you're getting this free education from grad students, telling you what these things are, from millipedes to ferns in Hawaii and fungi and moths in Hawaii and all kinds of stuff. So it's like, it's really fun. So I had never thought I could have been an entomologist, and had iNaturalist been around when I was going to college, I might have been an entomologist rather than a geographer. So, who knows?